What do you make of Harrison Bader, other than the fact that it's postseason baseball and a lot of crazy stuff happens? But what do you make of it?
It's encouraging for him. I mean, as a guy who has struggled with plantar fasciitis myself, good to see him get over that injury. We all know that if he gets a fastball down the middle, he can turn on it and hit some fastballs. He kind of cheats on them and gets ahead and dead pull on some of those fastballs. But after the season he's been through, that was a kind of injury that could have ruined his career because he's a guy who depends on his feet. It's good to see him get over that plantar fasciitis, and he's run into a couple, 3 home runs in this playoff so far. So good for him, good for a good guy like Harrison.
Yeah, and the Yankees may not have made it to a Game 5 without his home run in Game 4. I mean that was his home runs have been big in this series. So, and he bailed him out earlier in this series as well. So I've enjoyed watching him play. John Denton with us. And John, by the way, John Denton 555. Follow him on Twitter. He's a great follow. As you look at the Cardinals season, I don't know that, like in terms of the postseason, I don't know that there's anything, where you kind of spend a lot of time going deep into, because first of all, postseason baseball is crazy. There's a lot of teams that should hit that don't hit. There's no rhyme or reason for it. There is a pattern with the Cardinals, but I don't know whether it's, they don't handle pressure well. They're just running into much better pitching. I don't know what it is, but was there anything that jumped out at you other than the fact that they just didn't hit very well at all as a team in that loss to the Phils?
Bernie, I think you got to focus on the 3 and 4 hitters. If Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado don't hit, they don't win in the regular season. When they don't hit in the playoffs, they're not going to win. Like, every team in the league is set up like that. If your big players don't hit, you're not going to win. It doesn't matter any other stats you come up with. If 3 and 4 aren't going to hit, and they're not going to hit with runners on base, you're just not going to win. I mean, Albert Pujols found a way to get on base. Lars Nootbaar got on base. Juan Yepes had a huge home run, but 3 and 4 didn't hit. Ryan Helsley blew a game, but 3 and 4 didn't hit in Game 1. They didn't hit in Game 2, and you don't win. Like you said, the playoffs are random and things like that happen. Now, Nolan Arenado did hit the ball really hard. Like, if you look at his expected batting averages, he should have had 3 or 4 hits in the series, but
no, he did.
Sometimes it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And these little bloops and dinks and dunks, that's baseball. They land for a base hit. You can hit a bullet and it goes right into a glove. So no, there's no doubt that he ran into some of that. John, you know me pretty good by now. I don't ask questions to try to set you up or to get a specific answer that I want to hear. I just respect your knowledge, and I think you're a very fair guy. Do you think that, looking back on it, do you think Ali Marmol would do anything different? I mean, it was just your thoughts on that.
Well, he says he wouldn't. He said Ryan Helsley told him that he was fine, that the finger was not an issue. He struck out. He got the first out of the 9th inning. He got the outs in the 8th inning. I think looking back on it now, maybe asking Ryan Helsley to go, try to get 5 outs was a little too much. I think maybe he should have stuck by Giovanni Gallegos a little longer there. It's easy for us to look back on it now. And, he was told that Ryan Helsley's finger was okay. He was examined by doctors. He had a bullpen on that Thursday. He got the outs he needed in the 8th inning. He came in, was told there was no issue with the finger, and then all of a sudden there was an issue with the finger. Should he have maybe had a reliever ready to go after he hits bomb? Sure. Looking back now, you could say that, but from everything he was told and from the way Helsley looked in the 8th, I just it's 2020 to look back now, but it's. He could have made a move there. I don't like trying to ask Ryan Helsley to get 5 outs. That's right. Even with a bad finger or what. That's maybe asking a little too much in that situation.
Yeah, the more I thought about it and sort of letting the heat of the moment, cool down a little bit, I think you nailed it. It obviously was not a problem to use Helsley, and Helsley was telling the truth, and he looked great. and then all of a sudden it just went haywire, and then you're left to think, well, wait a minute, that's probably overly ambitious when you're sort of in the unknown anyway, because you don't know how that finger is going to react to work, and if nothing else, you got to have someone ready. You sort of have to, just as a precaution. So I agree with you, and I think that's fair. I don't think anyone's trying to cheap shot him. I think that's fair. So.
No, Bernie. One thing I understood they wanted to get Albert Pujols as many at bats as possible. The one quibble I would have is I would have betted Albert Pujols fifth. Like I said, if 3 and 4 aren't going to hit, you're not going to win in that series. And I understand maybe trying to get Pujols another at bat, but he's more valuable to them in that spot, protecting Goldschmidt, protecting Arenado. Like I said, if 3 and 4 don't hit, you're not going to win in that series. I would have betted Pujols fifth as opposed to second.
Yeah, and I think I think with Nootbaar, who had a good series and really was a terrific hitter, except one slump he had in the second half, and Brendan Donovan, I know he didn't do anything hitting fifth, but if you just people go to Baseball Reference and look at his splits, when he hit second this season, the numbers were fantastic. So you have those two guys at the top, and they're going to at least make things interesting by getting on base and creating opportunities. And maybe that relaxes the 3 and the 4 hitter, but at least you got the 5 hitter there to maybe clean it up if he has to. I agree with you. I've been wondering about that myself. Yeah,
I understand the thinking of wanting to get Albert as many at bats as possible, and Albert was red hot, but I just think you've got to do everything in your power to protect 3 and 4. It's easier for them to pitch around those guys. And like you said, I think Brendan Donovan had the highest on-base percentage of any Cardinal rookie in history. He's a guy who's going to take you deep into counts. He hits with 2 strikes. He hits when he's behind in the count. I would have just liked to seen him and Nootbaar ahead to get on base and to challenge the pitchers. And then you got Albert looming to protect 3 and 4.
John Denton with us from MLB.com, covers the Cardinals, as you all know. John, looking ahead, what do you think the Cardinals need to do this offseason? It can be one thing if you've got in your mind a list of 2 or 3 things they need to at least try to do. What areas would you identify?
Well, Bernie, they got to tackle the catching position right off the bat. I mean, I think we all know, Andrew Kisner's a fine backup. I'm not sure he's an everyday catcher. And then they've got to decide shortstop. And, they're not the type of team that goes out and spends $200 million in free agency usually, but they do have an excess of pitching. You've got to decide which pitchers you want to go forward with. You got to get an answer from Adam Wainwright. I think Adam Wainwright will be back, but then you got to take Dakota Hudson and maybe even Jack Flaherty and dangle them on the trade market and see if you can get a starting everyday catcher or a starting everyday shortstop. Those are 2 very important positions. They haven't had to think about going out and finding a catcher for the past 2 decades, but that's a big position now. And I know everybody's hot on Wilson Contreras, but he doesn't really fit the Cardinal way. He's not a defensive-minded catcher. I don't know if that's the right way to go, but they definitely have to hit the defense, the catcher, and the shortstop positions.
Yeah, I would say, and you know me, man, all I do is study numbers. I would say he's below average as a catcher, but he's not terrible, and I think the offense would offset it. But it comes down to cost, too. I don't know what the cost is going to be and how many teams will be bidding on him. It's kind of interesting. I like the fact that he's got some edge. I think they could use that a little bit. But we'll see what goes on. But frankly, I hear some people talking about other catchers, and I'm like, wait a minute. Y'all haven't – the Cardinals – the last time they looked for a starting catcher, it was after the 1999 season. It's been they have had 2 catchers in that spot, 2 primary catchers. The rest have been backups, Matheny and then Molina, since 2000. And it's like you finally have a chance to really upgrade that position. I just hope they don't settle because this isn't, in fact, a rare opportunity for them to upgrade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's almost like talking about the Packers quarterbacks for the last 50 years or whatever,
Right.
I mean, putting it the way you put it, yeah. I mean, that's, as we all know, that's a position where you can't settle. That's a very important position, and, this is a franchise that values defense. So, yes, Contreras is a good hitter, but if he's a subpar defensive player, and you know he's getting older and he's on the way down and he's played his best baseball, I'm not sure that's the right direction to go.
If you look at the one thing about the rotation, and I try not to overreact to postseasons because, after all, we did see Max Scherzer get blown up by the Padres in Game 1 of their series, so nothing's for sure. But the Cardinals have a lot of really solid, good starting pitchers. But do you think they need that guy, that guy who is at least capable of dominating and getting the jump and giving you a chance to grab a series lead or to extend a series lead, whatever it may be? Do you think that's a priority at all? I go back and forth on it, actually.
I go back and forth as well, Bernie. Like it would be nice to have, but you know what? Those guys don't grow on trees. They're not cheap. They don't come easy. I think Jack Flaherty could potentially be that guy again if he can ever get healthy, if he can ever stay healthy. He showed signs of it at the end of the last season. I just don't think that's high enough on their priority list right now. I think they have enough pitching to win. I think they have enough pitching to win in the playoffs. The other positions, catcher and shortstop, are far more important. And you know what? Every team in the league gets pop out of their corner outfielders, but the Cardinals didn't get that this past season. So I wouldn't be surprised if they don't, put Tyler O'Neill on the trade market also and see what they could get for him to see if they could land another big bat in those corner outfield spots.
What are your feelings on Dylan Carlson? I think we all agree it was a very disappointing season, but I think he's a really talented guy. We don't know how much that thumb played a role in some of his problems, but I was really surprised that he was so ineffective against right-handed pitching. But does this change your view of him going forward?
You know, Bernie, I wrote in spring training that I thought he was the next guy. I thought this was going to be a breakout year. I thought this was really going to be a huge year for him. They put him in the leadoff spot to start off, and it just didn't go as planned. And he's never been a guy this splitty. For some reason, he didn't hit right-handed pitching this year. And, you know, like I said, the thumb injury was an issue, but he wasn't hitting right-handers before the thumb issue. So they've got to figure that out. Dylan knows that. Dylan's a worker. Dylan's one of these guys who lives around the ballpark. His dad's a high school coach. I think he'll get it figured out. It's way, way too early to give up on him or get down on him. I think he has superstar potential. I think he has 5 tools where he could really help you, but he's got to figure that out. You can't be a guy who can't hit can't hit right-handed pitching and be an everyday player. It's just like Nolan Gorman can't be a guy who has to sit on the bench every time a left-hander pitches. He's got to be able to hit both guys if he's going to be an everyday player. So, that's obviously an area of concern going into next season.
Hey, one more for you, John Denton, and thank you for your time as always, man. I'm spoiled because you not only come on, but you stay on, and I get to have a great conversation. No, man, it's awesome. What are your thoughts on Jordan Walker and his trajectory? Do you think he's got much of a chance to be on the opening day roster, or do you think they'll want to give him time in AAA first?
Bernie, first off, this kid is 20 going on like 30 years old. Like, he is so mature, so beyond his years. He has 2 great parents at home. He's been raised the right way. I was in Springfield earlier this year, Bernie. He got off the scales and came to me, and I said, "What are you weighing?" And he said, "I just weighed 250 for the first time in my life today." Like, they've put on 25 pounds on the kid, and now he's going to start lifting. I really think, and I hope, just for the storylines, you know how we are. We pull for the stories. I think he could be a Albert Pujols type story where, maybe they don't want to start him in the major leagues, but he just forces his way onto the roster. And I was there at the final spring training game back in, 2001, when Albert Pujols forced his way onto that roster. Bobby Bonilla pulled a hamstring, and I think Jordan Walker could do the exact same thing. His maturity level is such at a high level. He's got this amazing throwing arm. You can play him in the outfield. I think he can handle the pressure. He's so mature. Cardinal fans really need to be excited. Like, any videos you get to watch of this kid, watch every bit of it you can watch, because he is so mature and so intelligent, and he's the total package. And I would really like to see him push his way onto this roster in the spring.
I agree with you about shortstop. My only concern, it's not my concern. It's more about what I anticipate the Cardinals will feel like, and maybe I'm wrong. It's been happening a lot. I'm wrong, but they love Mason Wynn, and he's a little a ways off, but I don't know if they'd spend a lot of money at that position when they feel they got somebody potentially special on the way. And getting closer. Yeah, but on the other hand, we hear about that all the time. He's got a chance to be special. Maybe sometime you got to take the leap and go with someone who is already established to be special. So I don't know which way they'll go on that.
Yeah. Bernie, I was impressed. Mason Wynn had 35 doubles this year. He hit the ball with more power than you expect for a little guy like him. He's a great base stealer, and that arm is just like in spring training when you were just casually watching him, and all of a sudden he makes a throw to first, and you're just like, "Whoa, where did that come from?" He can hit 100 easily on the gun. He's got next level stuff. Him and Jordan Walker are kind of tied to the hip. They're the same age. They played short and third most of the season. Those two could really be difference makers. I would love to see them push for major league spots in spring training. That would be really cool.
John Denton, thank you, brother. I appreciate you very much. We'll try not to bother you too much, but I miss talking to you, so I don't know. I might not be able to resist saying, no, we got to get John Denton on. So thank you.
Anytime, Bertie. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
See you, buddy. That's our friend John Denton. Talking with a lot of good stuff there. He and I, in a civil way, disagree with Contreras. I do agree that he's not the ideal defensive catcher, but I think he's good enough for someone that would also give you, 20-some home runs and one of the best hitting catchers out there. Now, I don't know what the cost is, so I don't know. See, that's the thing. I don't know what the cost would be. But I tell you what, I look at his defense and. Yeah, there's some things I like. There's some things I definitely don't like. But there's nothing that jumps out at me as like, oh, man, he is just flat out awful. I think he's below average, but not falling off the cliff below average. And and I'll just say this and then shut up, and then we'll move on. But some of the catchers I hear, best fans in baseball talking about and buzzing about a little bit, and some of the media buzzing about it somewhat to a point. The Cardinals are, they're interested in Tucker Barnhart, or it's like, hey, can they trade for Jacob Stallings? And I just scratch my head, and it's no disrespect to those gentlemen because I do respect them. But first of all, their defensive skills aren't what they're cracked up to be. Maybe earlier in their careers it's true. But a lot of time's gone by since Barnhart won the Gold Glove in 2017, and his defensive skills, like the metrics and everything else, they've really declined. And Stallings can't hit at all. Barnhart can't either, but Stallings can't hit at all. And his defensive work is fine, but it's not like, wow, this guy is great. It's nothing like that at all. So I'm confused when you have a chance to upgrade and search for a catcher for the first time since the 1999 going into 2000 offseason. And you're sort of going to bring in the same profile of what you've been living with the last couple years, a catcher position that provides no offense and is overrated defensively. The Cardinals catchers, I said this on a show recently, the Cardinals catchers over the last two seasons, 21-22, they ranked 30th in baseball in wins above replacement. It's the worst catching group in the majors, and you have a chance to make it much better. So your answer is to go pursue a no-hit. I'm going to be respectful. A no-hit, average at best defensive catcher? What? How does that move you forward? I just want someone to explain that to me. I'm not a smart man, but I know when you got the worst catching in baseball offensively and defensively the last two seasons, you don't make a move to replace what you've lost with someone who, in terms of offense and in terms of defense, is pretty much what you have had the last couple of years. How does that make your team better? If someone can explain that to me, then I'll have an open mind about these no-hit, okay defensive catchers. But I'm obviously missing something, Jimbo.
I tell you what, if the name like Tucker Barnhart that gets thrown out there, I told you yesterday, I was like, oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. I can just see this already. One, that guy never stays healthy. So I wouldn't even put all my eggs in the basket on that guy because of that alone. You need somebody you know is going to be there. But if you're going to be that conservative, and I'll call it conservative just to go, I want defense first, I would tell you, well, your offense isn't good enough for that right now. If you had when Yachty first came up, it was the mid-2000s. So that team had plenty of offense elsewhere in the lineup. You could afford that, and we know what Yachty was at the time. He was just tremendous defensively. This team can't afford that. This team needs a bat in that lineup to help offset, which right now is questionable in terms of how good the lineup will be for me, as far as I'm concerned. There are questions. What's that outfield going to look like? I can't count on too much in that outfield right now. If they come to me, and I really feel this is what we're going to hear from the guys down there at the ballpark, well, we're not giving up on O'Neill, and we're good with Carlson because we think he's going to be healthy, and Lars Nootbaar. Okay, but that doesn't excite me. That tells me you need to offset, and if you can offset with some offensive catcher, you better do it because I can't count on anything from O'Neill. It might be much more of the same, which we've seen. Good week. Looks like, he's hurt. He can't play now for 3 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, wait a little longer. And meanwhile, you're sitting there going, well, who's going to fill the void? Not Walker, because we want him to play down there a little bit longer. We can't bring him up from Double-A. I mean, those are the kind of decisions that I just fear we're going to hear and see from this organization. And the one thing you circle is go get a catcher that can bring some offense. You have to do that.
And if people are adamant about not wanting Contreras, I think his defensive limitations are being overstated. But like I said, I'm honest. I would say, he's a below-average catcher. But he's not a stiff behind the plate. I mean, he's fine, especially if he's providing offense. But I just don't. I just get really, really confused. People don't seem to grasp. This is a opportunity that hasn't come along, literally in this century. A chance to go search for a catcher because the job is finally open. Literally, that hasn't happened since the previous century. To make it sound dramatic.
So true.
And so it's like, let's go get that Jacob Stallings. Let's trade for him. What's Miami want for him? Let's go get that Jacob Stallings. Jacob Stallings, who, by the way, was rated by Fangraphs as a below-average catcher defensively this past year. Wilson Contreras was rated on the plus side. And, again, it wasn't like a huge number, but he was – Fangraphs, which I respect, they put him in the above-average, slightly above-average category. But Jacob Stallings, a guy who, again, I respect his competitiveness and all that, Jacob Stallings, keep in mind what I just told you, below average defensively in 2022, and hit 223. His on-base percentage was 292. His slugging percentage, Jim, was 292. Ooh. He makes Molina, the old Molina, offensively look like Johnny Bleepin Bench. He hit 4 home runs in about 375 at-bats. 4. He can't run the bases. His defensive skills are eroding. But yet it's like, Bernie, hey, Derek Gould, what do you think chances are Cardinals can get Jacob Stallings? My answer to one guy emailed me about that is I hope the chances are none.
I'm there with you on that one.
So look, a below-average catcher at 223 with no power at all and a terrible base running rating, which is not unusual for catchers, right?
Yeah.
This is the answer that apparently more than a few people endorse. This is the answer. Really? And we rip the ownership and the management. I mean, a lot of the people that are complaining about, well, DeWitt doesn't want to win, Mozeliak doesn't want to win, they're the people who want to go out and get Jacob Stallings. You don't want to win, apparently. You know what I mean?
Yeah, look, somebody came to me and said, that's the move. I go, well, they're obviously not trying to win if that's your move. You're just going, we'll just throw somebody out there. We're not worried about trying to improve the offense. You have to. That's what we saw in the playoffs. When the two guys went down, or didn't perform, shouldn't say went down, but when they didn't perform, and I'm talking about Goldie and Arenado, the team didn't score runs. You need another bat. And oh, by the way, one of the guys that was hitting, Albert, he's not here anymore. So you got to replace that. Who would have thought you'd be going, hey, there's 24 home runs that are gone out of this lineup because Albert's gone. Right.
I know, man. I know it's a long segment because we've been going with – we started with Denton, but I just there's a lot to talk about there and follow up on. Listen, man, and I'm not opposed if the Cardinals want to make a trade for a catcher. I mean, a guy like Sean Murphy is excellent. And, listen, I think the price would be pretty high, but I also know the Cardinals have a million prospects, and at some point they're all either got to play in St. Louis or you got to trade some of them. And, Oakland's always open for business, always.
Yes.
So I'm not saying it's got to be Contreras. And I actually feel like I have not explained that well enough. So I apologize to the listeners. I'm not saying Contreras or bust. There are other options, but I'm just saying you don't settle for somebody who, God bless him, and I respect the hell out of both of those guys, Stallings and Barnhart. You don't settle for, in effect, what you just have had the last 3 years. You just don't settle. Why would you do that? Again, it's the first time this century you have a chance to search for a catcher and really upgrade the position. How can you let that opportunity pass? And I think that's a very reasonable point of view. And I know I keep saying it over and over again, so I'm probably annoying. I accept that, but it's really important to me. This is like something that's really, I think, very, very important. So anyway, I appreciate your patience listening to me. But that's my thing this offseason. It's not the only thing. But I would say that's my thing. That's the one thing that interests me the most. Because to me, it will tell us exactly whether the Cardinals want to move forward and get better and bring in someone of impact, or they just want to say, well, the Brewers aren't going to be, they'll be worse next year, and all those other teams aren't competing yet. We can get in the playoffs, we win 90 games. I mean, is it going to be more of that? The same old outcome? And again, I respect the team for getting into the playoffs as much as they have. I don't dismiss that like some do. You got to get into the playoffs to win the playoffs. But they got to take a better team into the playoffs. And here's one, the biggest area where they have it, like a void that requires attention, where they can upgrade, it's catcher. Where there's no complications about, well, we have a prospect that we love. No, they don't love Ivan Herrera, so everyone needs to shut up about that. They couldn't wait to get the kid out of here. He may be good 2-3 years from now, but he ain't ready in 2023.